Welcome to a special episode of Crash Course in Jewish History as we approach the festival of Purim. And once again, this episode is inspired by the works of Rabbi Ken Spiro and also may include some background commentary from baby Achia, which I apologize for in advance, but he is an essential part of Jewish history. So he might be joining us as we go along. Now, just to give a little bit of historical context to what's happening when we find ourselves in the festival of Purim with the Megillah reading, this story, the Scroll of Esther, and what's happening in the context of the area that the Jews are living in. So if we look at this region in the Middle East and who has been conquering and controlling the region, we have first the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, and now we come to a time of Persian rule. And following a brief reign of Darius comes Cyrus as the ruler of Persia. And Cyrus is the one who gives permission for the Jews to return to Jerusalem and build the temple. Now, very interestingly, we see what happens then, the same pattern at any time when Jews are permitted to return to the land of Israel, even in 1948 with the establishment of the modern day state of Israel in the same area, is that there are a core of Jews who return to the land, and there are also Jews who choose to remain in the diaspora. And this is exactly what happened under Cyrus's rule. So there were a core group of Jews who moved back to Jerusalem and began the building of the temple, the second temple, so rebuilding the temple. Now, one of the issues that we have at this time is that there are Samaritans who live in the area. They never liked the Jews. They don't like the new influx. And part of the dispute that goes on means that the Persians suspend building for 18 years. So for 18 years, they aren't allowed to continue the rebuilding that they've started of the temple. And it's during this time that the story of Purim takes place. However, unlike Cyrus, who behaved reasonably favorably towards the Jewish people, we have a new king that comes to power at this time. In Hebrew, we call him Ahasuerus. In English, Ahasuerus. And he is not particularly fazed about the Jewish people, but he has an advisor, Haman, who passionately hates the Jewish people. And we understand that Haman is a descendant from the Amalekites, who have a history of hating the Jewish people. This is something that the scroll tells us, the Midrash, the commentary on the scroll explains, is actually in his blood. He just hates Jews that much. But also he has a run-in with Mordecai, the uncle of Esther, who's the queen. It becomes the queen and is the heroine of our story. And this only makes him hate the Jews more. The fact that Mordecai, as a Jew, will not bow down to idols, gods, or other people, that means he refuses to bow down to Haman. And this is one of the factors that influences Haman's hatred of the Jews as well. And it's part of how he sells this plan to eradicate the Jews to the king, is explaining that these are people who don't follow the laws of the land. They've got their own rules, their own traditions, their own ideas, their own texts, and that we should be getting rid of them. And it's the beginning of the story. And what we see with the Scroll of Esther and the way that the story goes is everything gets flipped on its head. It's a topsy-turvy story. Everything's upside down. And that's one of the reasons why we have this tradition of dressing up for Purim. You know, everything in the Scroll of Esther is hidden. We don't even have Hashem's name written in the scroll. It's something that we read in. The scroll reads more like a historical account of what happened than a holy, spiritual, biblical text that would talk about Hashem's role. And it gives us a clue in exile as well that we're not going to be able to see the miracles that we saw in biblical times, that actually we're going to need to look for Hashem in everyday life. So it does contain a really beautiful message for us today too, to remind us to keep on looking out for those miracles that we see in everyday life. One of those miracles you can hear in the background. My apologies. So for those who aren't familiar with the story, we've got this king. He has an advisor. At the initial start of the scroll, he's hosting a banquet. His wife doesn't do what he asks her to do. It's decided that it would be best to get rid of her. His advisor said to get rid of her. and he holds a contest to find the most beautiful woman in the realm to become his wife, and ultimately the most beautiful woman who is chosen to become his wife is Queen Esther. She's of the Jewish faith. Her uncle advises her to keep her Jewish faith a secret, which she does, though she will later reveal it when it comes to saving the Jewish people. There are a series of events that take place which Haman, the advisor to the king, increases his power and his hatred to the Jews increases. And at the same time, we have Mordecai coaching Esther, her uncle coaching her on how she can approach the king and can annul the decree that's been made against the Jewish people. So ultimately, Purim, the name, is lots, as in like a lottery, because that was how Haman chose the date on which to hang Mordecai and kill the Jewish people. To kill the Jewish people. Ultimately, it becomes the day that he's hung on. And the whole point of the story is that we see everything gets flipped on its head. The fascinating thing about the book of Esther, like I said, is that God isn't mentioned in it. So we learn a lot more about the background from the Talmud, which writes about this state of affairs actually being prophesied in Deuteronomy, where God says, I will surely conceal my face on that day. The word for conceal is hester, and it's got the identical roots to the word Esther. So we've got conceal and the name of the queen who ends up saving the Jewish people, and the name of the scroll that we end up reading without the name of God. So I just thought I'd share a little bit about some of the commentary from the rabbis there and this mystical aspect of the Scroll of Esther as well, even though we're really thinking about it from a crash course in Jewish history perspective. I think it's interesting to add in some of that beautiful commentary that we see. So the phrase in the book of Esther that describes Purim as flipped over is our indication that nothing happened by chance. And we actually see this amazing structure in the Megillah where everything is almost like a mirror. So everything is flipped. Like at the beginning, the Jews are accused of being a different people with different traditions. And this is one of the things that Haman uses to convince the king that the Jews should be annihilated. And at the end, we see the Jews creating the new traditions, the traditions of Purim, of celebrating, of giving gifts to the poor, of having the Purim feast. These things are a new Jewish tradition that is created, and that is going to help with the continuation of the Jewish people. So we see this flipping. At the beginning, we see that Mordecai has no power and Haman has all the power. By the end, Haman is hung on the gallows and Mordecai is elevated and celebrated. This is also the flipping round as well. At the beginning, Esther's identity as a Jew is concealed. Her uncle tells her not to tell King Ahasuerus that he's Jewish. By the end, she uses revealing her Jewish identity to save the Jewish people. And there are many more examples that we won't go into today, but this is a book where everything mirrors, flips, turns over. And it's one of the things that makes it one of the intriguing historical texts that we have in our Jewish tradition. I think another important part of the story actually comes after the scroll is finished, and that is that after this all takes place, King Ahasuerus changes his attitude to the Jewish people, and they are able to continue building the second temple. And this ends the Babylonian exile. So if we look at the chronology of the Babylonian exile, we've got Nebuchadnezzar assuming the throne of Babylon in 442 BCE, and then making the decision to exile the king of Judah and the top 10,000 scholars of the Jewish people in 433. Then we've got the destruction of the temple in 422, and the Persian ruler Cyrus only allows the Jews to return to Israel in 370. And he allows the rebuilding of the temple, but like I said, the Samaritans stop it. So actually, it's only in 352 BCE that Darius, who follows Ahasuerus, allows the construction of the temple to begin. It's 70 years since the fall of Jerusalem, and Ahasuerus has died with a more favorable view of the Jewish people, but it's actually Darius II, who's the son of Esther, who comes in and allows the construction of the temple to begin again. So that's a snapshot of some of the historical context for the festival of Purim, and a little detour for our course in Jewish history. We will return to the chronology, but I thought it'd be really interesting to share a little bit about Purim first.